What happened to companies simply making money for their shareholders?
Absolutely, and that is the first duty of a company, to identify customers and actually serve them. And the thing that upsets me about ESG, and I wrote about Mike Cannon-Brookes because he was invited to this conference. ESG stands for Environmental, Social and Governance. And it's probably at one level okay for companies to think about their environmental, social and governance agendas. But what it actually turns into is a package. You have to sign on for the lot. You have to sign on for climate alarmism. You have to commit to renewables. And so Mike Cannon-Brookes was the star attraction at an ESG conference where he said that he couldn't wait to take over AGL and organise to close down Bayswater Power Station in New South Wales and Loy Yang in Victoria, massive coal-fired power stations that actually provide a huge amount of baseload energy in those states. And he wanted to close them down by 2030 on the promise of all kinds of renewable energy miracles that were going to be forthcoming between now and then.
Okay, now let's talk about Taiwan. Were you as surprised as me to learn that Taiwan is freer than Australia?
Pleasantly surprised. I certainly had some awareness because of our research at the Institute of Public Affairs, Fred, that Australia was slipping down the rankings. We've been very good at producing more and more red tape. We've expanded the size of governments. That's basically been non-stop since about 2009 in Australia. As government grows, the scope for freedom shrinks. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that Taiwan had not just rejected authoritarianism as it is on the mainland of China, and authoritarianism as indeed it was when the nationalists first settled there. They've rejected it in every sense. They want a free entrepreneurial society where people can actually make their own choices and build businesses and export to the world. It's a terrific story.
Sounds like what Australia used to be like. Now, Australians have, for the past couple of generations, grown accustomed to not having any serious threat to their sovereignty. Do you think the constant threat from China helps Taiwanese value their freedom more?
Well, as I say, it makes it all the more impressive that they've not gone down an authoritarian road. They're not panicked. Perhaps it allows them to put things in perspective. Is that why they did a better job than Australia at managing COVID? Because they understand what real problems look like, that they don't overreact, that they understand that people can find their own solutions. Businesses can find their own solutions to all kinds of problems for customers if government will just get out of the road.
Okay, so let's talk about the IPA's robust and passionate defence of Australian culture, or what's left of it, as some people might say. Our country was founded at the tail end of the Enlightenment, when the idea of freedom, individuality, equality and personal responsibility were being understood as the best foundation for enabling as many people as possible to pursue their own happiness. And for most of our history, I think, we've generally understood this. But now, not so much. Scott, what were the big turning points, in your opinion, in our history when we started to lose sight of that original ideal?
Well, that's a wonderful question, because we were born free, as you say, Fred. The Enlightenment, came out with the first fleet. It was literally written into the instructions given to Arthur Phillip. And then even at the time of Federation, this was almost like a perfection of the Westminster system that had been brought to us by the British, itself part of Western civilisation. When I think of turning points, Fred, I think of being in Sydney for the bicentennial. It was a Labor government. Bob Hawke was Prime Minister. The black armband view of history was around then. Isn't Australia terrible? And they objected and protested against the bicentennial, but Hawke was having none of it. They insisted on the slogan being celebration of a nation. Imagine if Albanese tried that on now. Imagine how the elites would go absolutely crazy. So even as late as 1988, there was still a feeling that Australia was something special, something to be celebrated. Still a view, I think, that mainstream Australians hold, but it's not one that you find in the elite institutions that actually run our country.